Hello and welcome to SAP TechEd 2020. Welcome to SAP UI5, all you need to know. My name is Stefan Beck. I'm the Chief Product Owner of SAP UI5, and I will guide you through the session today. So the idea is that I start with the key pillars of the SAP product direction. What is also the agenda? I will then talk to all of these key pillars later on to give you a complete overview. The goal is of today that I talk about our innovations that we have made in the past year, half year, since last TechEd, and to make them visible and transparent to you. I cannot go into all of the details, but I can tell you what is important, what was done, why we have done, what is in for you, and then also relate what you can and where you can find information and make you then really familiar with it and get into the technical details. And I will also give an outlook what is then next so that you have some kind of idea what we are after and what you can expect in the future. So let's directly go into the next slide. So we start with the key pillars of our investments. And as SAP UI5 is a UI framework, and UI framework that is used in the enterprise segment for enterprise business applications, it is important that we do a continuous investment into the technology and also do a continuous investment to keep the technology up to date. In the enterprise segment, you expect that you have applications that are not rebuilt every half year. You use applications, you educate your people in your company working with the applications, and therefore there is a kind of robustness and continuation expected. And why are we doing this technology innovation? Why are we providing the UI framework? That is for the reason of building the perfect and best possible user experience for the employees, for the end users inside your company. And the best technology does not help and does not lead to a good user experience if no one builds the application that you need to transport this user experience to your people. And therefore, the development experience is important. So how can we ease the development? How can we enable you to build as many as possible perfect Fiori applications? So development experience is the next key pillar of our investment. And then there's also a kind of a newer kid on the block from our perspective, and that is the so-called adoption experience. So at SAP, we have SAP UI5 as the major Fiori technology. It's used in S4, Business Suite, SuccessFactors. However, there are also other acquisitions that SAP has made. And at this point in time, they were using completely different technologies. They were using completely different designs. And we also received this feedback and from a lot of customers and also DSAG and other groups where customers are organized. And also you told us, hey, we want that SAP applications behave like SAP applications, and that is a kind of a zoo of this kind of different products with applications that all behave differently. Therefore, we as SAP gave the commitment to establish Fiori 3 as the technology guideline for all our products, and therefore we see the adoption experience or adoption challenge for this kind of products that we're using completely different UI technologies. How can this technologies be brought efficiently into the Fiori world? And that is somehow the picture. And then you can now see the roof on it. We built all this foundation and these pillars to achieve a modern and consistent user experience for the intelligent enterprise around the Fiori 3 design paradigm. So how do you have to read that slide? For instance, you have just applications, and in the end, the applications, regardless which technology they use, they create HTML and JavaScript. And HTML and CSS. And with the right styling, means the right CSS, you can change the colors. With the right HTML, you can also give them the right shapes. And for this reason, there was fundamental styles as built as an offering inside SAP, being HTML and CSS that can be taken and put on top of existing web applications to give them the visual design of Fiori. However, as it's only JavaScript, mainly CSS and HTML, there's nothing about the UI element behavior. That means if you have a date picker, it's not possible to specify the what happens inside the date picker if you then open it without JavaScript. And this is now a nice new web standard, being Web Components, that offers us to build such modular components that can be used on HTML level. And HTML level is something that every framework or each JavaScript framework in the world creates in the end. And therefore, we have put a lot of reusable controls assets of UI5 and offer them now as web components. And this can be used for any kind of JavaScript framework. That's quite easy. However, you can see with the next offering that you can also add some glue code to make it even more comfortable to use these web components inside such a technology. Therefore, there's a small extension to them called SAP UI5 Web Components for React. So this then gives you a kind of a broken model adaptation towards React to reduce the amount of glue code that you have to write. However, it's also possible to use web components easily in Angular or Vue or whatever kind of framework of choice. The next level now here is we enter the world of UI5, means Open UI5 and SAP UI5. And this is then the real framework for application development to achieve the best possible Fiori qualities. And I also would like to talk about Fiori Elements, who sits on top of UI5 and adds a kind of additional framework that leads to metadata-driven UIs that even lead to application in the end that fall into the category no-code application, means you can get a Fiori application, Fiori element application without writing any line of code. And also very important, there is for the framework parts, means for UI5, Open UI5, SAP UI5, and also Fiori Elements, a thing that we called UI5 flexibility. And this is a really powerful set of tools that allow you to adjust the applications that are built. There are certain levels, so you can, the developer can adjust them, users can adjust them, and also end users can do it. And in this case, we call it personalization. So very powerful, and this will also be touched later on during my presentation, but here to set the stage of the different options that we have in place. Good, now let's come to the UI5 technology innovation. So we talked about that quite often in the past. The ones who have already attended the sessions at TechEd or UI5Con will heard the term UI5 evolution. This is somehow the project name that we use to advance the UI5 framework, to modularize it, and to modernize it in a way and to make it overall more efficient. So this is definitely ongoing. It's now diligent, hard work to continue, and there's no, call it fundamental breaking news that I can share this year's, and also we talked about that the last years, so that I put a slightly different focus in this year's presentation. Let's start now with the UI5 tooling process. So we invested into the UI5 tooling, and first of all, we did this from a kind of a selfish perspective. We want to advance our tooling from Maven to something that is state of the art, to build our own framework. However, we also want that you in the market benefit from that, and also that we offer you a kind of really modern tooling for the ones who prefer this kind of command line tooling that is getting more popular these days. And so we also want to cover the basic use cases for application and library development with our new tooling. And it's not only that we offer tooling, but as we are an open source framework and also have a quite active community, we also have want to build a foundation that you can advance and enhance the tools and add also stuff that others then can reuse. That means we also want a foundation for an extensible tooling framework. Now let's look a bit into the timeline. When did we start and what happened since then? So roughly 2 years back, we did the first version of the tooling, and in parallel, we brought OpenUI5 or offered UI5 via the NPM registry for downloading. Then we advanced the tooling towards the second half of 2018 and allowed custom tasks to be built in. Means if you want a transpiling or whatever, you can add such tasks into our tooling chain. Then early 2019, we achieved the first version. Then we worked towards the integration in the SAP Web IDE. It's gray and not black because it for you was done in a transparent way. It was done behind the scenes, just reuse the latest and greatest and have the biggest possible reuse. Then we looked into the custom middleware extensibility and server extensibility later in 2020. Then early 2020, we started to change a part of the UI5 build already to the new tooling. That means the framework theme build. Then the new business application studio came up and we integrated the tooling into the business application studio. Business application studio I will talk about later on, so be a bit patient. And then it was around April, May, we did a really big step as the process behind was also very difficult. We now offer the UI5 tooling 2.0 and in parallel the complete SAP UI5 offering via NPM to give you the real command line interface way of working now with SAP UI5 if you prefer that. And we want to continue in that direction. And the next step is that we still work on extensibility. For instance, that we want to offer the command extensibility, command or type extensibility. And then, as you heard from the very beginning, we want also then to switch the UI5 build completely to this new tooling and also only use the new tooling internally, also get rid of Maven and Grunt, what is still used in parallel. Good. Now from the tooling, we come to another very important aspect. If you deliver the software, that is somehow how to test the software, how to test your applications. And we decide in what is quite common between 3 areas, so the functional testing and the integration testing, and also the end-to-end testing. And for the functional testing, we are recommending QUnit, also an open standard for functional integration testing. And for the end-to-end testing, we have as a framework, testing framework, Jasmine syntax, and this is somehow the foundation. And as test runner for the execution, we recommend Karma for functional and integration tests and UI5 for the end-to-end testing. And now this translates nicely to the tooling story, as Karma was just now integrated into the UI5 tooling. So you can now connect the Karma runner to the UI5 tooling and also nicely execute the test. So this is also quite new. And also what you can see in the middle, the test recorder is also something completely new. I have to admit that test recorder is most likely, or right now, a bit overselling. It's not meant to completely record the tests. However, it is still a very, very useful tool as it gives you the stable control selectors that leads to very stable and robust tests. And these control selectors can then be used in the OPA test, our one-page acceptance test. OPA, what is an enhancement of the QUnit. So use the selectors in the OPA tests and also in the UI5 tests to get all your test environment as stable and possible and to a large extent robust to small and minor changes that might come up if we enhance and develop the frameworks further. So it's around stable IDs, what is the background, and as we know best, what kind of selectors are stable. We want to offer this via the test recorder to you to give you the best possible recommendation. Good. This to the tooling aspects, and now let's look to the next part. What is now the rendering and the controls asset? The picture is now usually very clear. DOM-based rendering is also faster now in the modern browsers for the initial rendering. Therefore, we said, okay, we have now to change. and adopt the DOM-based rendering. Internally, we call it semantic rendering, but for you, I think DOM-based rendering is clear what it means. And with that, we got the rendering much faster and can achieve more or less twice the frames per second than before. So this is a big achievement, and we have done this to a large extent now for the important and controls and the UI5 controls that are mainly or primarily used. You have heard that for the adoption experience, we in parallel, also in the rendering and control sector, invested into web components. And web components also made use of a quite new web standard, the CSS variables, and also web components. We said, okay, let's directly use CSS variables. UI5 does not yet do it. And also, you know the reason, I11, which is still supported, does not support the CSS variables yet. Not yet, it will never support them, but I hope that we get rid of the I11 support soon. Therefore, we have now CSS variables and this newly built web components. What happened now is, okay, this cannot be done in a kind of an isolated way. And if we profit from the CSS variables, still maybe for the modern browsers in UI5, we can also make use of it. And therefore we said, okay, let's now for the modern browsers do that and use CSS variables. And why? It gives us the opportunity. You have a theme-based content that is really identical. And what does it then mean in the end if it's identical? You then can use the UI5 or the UI theme designer that works on this common theme-based content. And then you can theme OpenUI5, SAPUI5, and UI5 web components directly. That means you can apply the corporate design across our UI technologies, and also you at customer side, partner side can easily apply the corporate design, and you don't have redundant efforts per UI technology. So classic UIs, Web GUI, Web Dynpro, ABAP are connected, UI5, OpenUI5, SAPUI5 is connected, and also UI5 web components are connected. So there's quite some reach, and this is why we have now decided to go into this investment to give you the best possible return on investment for your work here. But now, what happened? I mentioned it already. We have more or less implemented web components now for some very important controls, and we have now two implementations. We have a control implementation for the button, and we have also a web component implementation for the button. And this was quite bad. So in the beginning, we didn't know, okay, web components, will they make it? Will they be accepted? And we said, okay, let's take the risk. But now web components look really good and cool, and we have stakeholders on them. But now there were also new requirements, like the product switch. That was one control for the UI Fiori design. And especially and obviously clearly, this is needed in UI5 web components, as this is a reuse layer. But also the Fiori Launchpad, who still uses UI5 controls, also needs a kind of product switch. And therefore, we had a new control and now have to implement it twice. And this is obviously weird. And that's it. Let's now really do the next step, and let's really integrate UI5 web components into UI5 and make UI5 web components also for the future, the control development model for new UI5 controls. And technically, we use then wrapper. And with these wrappers, we then connect the life cycle between the UI5 world and the web components world. And now this, you can nicely see how these innovations fit together. We have now connected three innovations. We have connected web components with CSS variables, and we have been able to connect them to UI5 because we have changed UI5 to the DOM-based, to the semantic rendering that you can see here. Because with string-based rendering, you have the disadvantage. If you do a screen update, a complete subtree is replaced, and all web components that would be in that subtree would completely lose their state, and this is definitely a no-go. Therefore, all these innovations now play hand in hand and bring us in a position that we have this nice offering for the adoption experience, but also profit ourselves, drink your own champagne in SAP UI5 and OpenUI5 to be able then to invest in the future in web components to have the best possible reuse for our control investments. Good. that's to the innovation in the technology innovation. Now let's look into the development experience. So we start here directly again with the bridge to what we heard beforehand. So the tooling, the UI5 tooling is also part of the development experience. So we have the UI5 libraries on NPM. We also have the TypeScript definitions on NPM. And also we have some generators on NPM that bring you in a position to generate and work with UI5 Freestyle and Fiori element applications. And now, what are the new kits on the block? That is now, we have two tooling offerings, the new SAP Cloud Platform Business Application Studio, and as a part of it, the kind of offline version, the Visual Studio .code. And on the next slide, I will quickly introduce the two of them. So what is the Business Application Studio? Most of you hopefully have already worked with UI5, and therefore you are used to the SAP Web IDE. And in the first place, the Business Application Studio is the modern successor of the SAP Web IDE. So it's a cloud-based tooling that offers the capabilities of the Web IDE and addresses some deficits and obviously some improvements that you will also see later on the next slide directly. Let's directly jump there. So as said, if you build a new tool, and we also have to build a tool for some technical reasons to also be able to enter the market in China. So if you build a tool anyhow, you want to advance the tool. And in the very beginning, if you start to work with a tool, it should work out of the box. And that is what the colleagues call a turnkey solution. So there are so-called dev spaces that you select. So a dev space for Fiori development or for, let's say, mobile development or for workflow development. And if you select such a dev space, you get a pre-configured set of tools that then directly allow you to start working. So more or less like in the car, turn the key, and you're good to go. And it's also very important that development environment is based on standard and open source artifacts to give you the best possible experience. There are two really perfect candidates out who are proven to be successful in the tooling area. That's on one hand side Eclipse, and Eclipse Theia is a kind of an open source project for tools. And also part of Eclipse Theia is the other really popular thing that is Microsoft Visual Studio .code. And both are the foundation of the newly available Business Application Studio. And we also want to give you a simple and simplified development experience. So there are still wizards, generators, code completion, all what you need to offer you a kind of a simplified development model. And also the integration in SAP solution is key. So if you want to develop an application, you first need a service from the backend. And so the Business Application Studio connects you easily, for instance, to the SAP Business API Hub and offers all the kind of services that the API Hub provides you. It also allows to connect you to on-premise systems and see what kind of services you have implemented there. Also, the other way around, once the Fiori application was built, it also allows you to deploy to the on-premise world, and therefore this kind of integration to other SAP solutions is really key. And with all that, the target is to give you the best possible, the ultimate productivity. And this means we do not only stop with development, there are also tailored test tools per dev space made available, and also things like a mock server, so to easily have some mock data for efficient testing available. So altogether, with that altogether, we want to really advance the tooling story and make you more productive. And also we hope that you enjoy now working more with that. So as said, I now talked a lot about the Business Application Studio. Quickly, there's also a version that you can use more or less offline, the Visual Studio Code based version that is available too. And you will also find a lot of documentation instructions how to use it. So this two together allow you to build already using the UI5 tooling applications, that's Freestyle or Fiori element application. However, in case SAP or partners build the application, they still need or often need something before they really fit the end customers, end users' needs. And for this, we have introduced UI flexibility services. Here we have prominently now the UI flexibility for key user, as this is a kind of prominent SAP Cloud platform service. However, we also have the UI flexibility as part of the development environment in the development scenario, and we also have the UI5 flexibility as personalization for the end user. Today in this presentation, we will now focus UI flexibility as part of the business application studio, as part of the development model. And what is the goal that we follow with UI flexibility? As said, we want to adjust applications, and adjusting applications per se is obviously no big deal. Everybody can do it. However, we want to do this in a modification-free way, so that although you adjusted the applications, you can still consume upgrades provided by SAP or by any partner, and don't end up in kind of reapplying your modification. And also the clear goal is that it should be quite easy. It should be intuitive, like a VCV experience, how you adjust the application. And it's also important that we go for a unified approach, that we have one adaptation story for UI5 freestyle application, for UI5 based Fiori element application, or for everything that is in between. Now, some more words, what is possible to do. So you can adapt the UIs. That means you can more or less pick all the visible fields on UI. You can move them around. You can group them. You can ungroup them. You can hide them. So all things that somehow change the visibility. But in the developer tooling, you also can have access to the control properties. You can also change the control properties, or you can also add things like a button. And if you have a button, usually something should happen if you click the button. Therefore, it's also important that you are able to extend the controllers so that you can bring the event handler that reacts to the button. And potentially the button click does something and it opens a new pop-up. And to implement the pop-up, you again need a view. Therefore, you have to extend the controllers and the views. And if you want and say, okay, I now do these adaptations, but I have different groups of users, then you can also create controller or application variants so that you can tailor the application in a modification-free way to the groups of users that you have in your enterprise. And as a last thing, also very nice and important, you can also adjust the text on the UI and the very prominent example. You can also change material number into patient if it's a kind of a hospital that you are working for. So here, a really powerful way of doing these adjustments to your application. And now there's also something brand new as I speak. It's currently the beta phase for the SAP Fiori tools. And the SAP Fiori tools help you to create freestyle and Fiori element application. And around TechEd timeframe, I expect the tools to be available so that you can directly work with them. And the Fiori tools support freestyle development, obviously. However, they also advance very much the Fiori elements-based development, because we hope that we can get the Fiori elements-based model adopted a bit more on the customer side. And why? So at SAP, we have the target that we really create 80% or 80+% of our application with Fiori elements, and only the dedicated ones that have special requirements with UI5, SAP UI5 freestyle. And why? Because the developer productivity with Fiori elements is extremely high. You can have your application developers more or less focusing on the business logic and more or less give some additional hints on the business logic side, what we call annotation. And these annotations are then used by the Fiori elements framework and then really lead to the complete UI. That means in the end, we bring you in a position to really write less code, from no code, low code to no code, means no code is the extreme, but low code is definitely something that you can achieve in a lot of cases. And if you have a kind of a strong technical reuse, what comes out of the box is that you achieve a high consistency, because the framework components that render the UI comply with the latest design specifications, are really built by expert, and therefore deliver you a centrally managed user experience. And if SAP decides to advance the Fiori designs, we change the templates, and in changing the generation templates, all your applications automatically follow, and then also follow the latest and greatest design paradigms. And in combination with what you have heard, the modification-free UI adaptation, that is really a strong story for you to achieve a high consistency. And also the enterprise readiness. So, the templates and the generators are built by the core experts in our company. That means we have high quality components, and also the experts that know about product standards like accessibility, nationalization, internationalization, globalization. All of them put all their know-how into these reusable components, so that you have a kind of a really strong and enterprise-ready solution at the end. Good, therefore, please really have a look into this kind of Fiori elements. And also there's now something that is quite new, a second generation of Fiori elements based on OData v4. What is then really the next generation that from now on should really be used whenever possible. There are still some gaps from a feature perspective. So if you need OData v2, okay, still possible, but the future direction is definitely OData v4, and we want to catch up from the features as fast as we can. Good. And now we really look into the future. What is coming next? So outside, there's now also new standards like ES6 and also TypeScript. And what we want to do is to enable you to code in your application or in your Fiori elements via a flexible programming model with TypeScript, and also to make use of the ES6 syntax. That is something that we are working on. And I hope that at the next UI5 Con, mid of next year, latest on the next TechEd, we can really show something that goes in that direction, and that is also eagerly awaited and communicated by the UI5 community. Good. Now coming to the user experience, means the, let's say, result that is then really visible by the end users. And also here I would like to recap what was done. So in the last year, we worked on SAP Fiori 3. So we have now this kind of dark version of Fiori 3, the light version of the Quartz, so the Quartz design. We worked on something like cards, product switch, this kind of new shell experience, but also the colleagues in other sessions will talk about. So that means the first thing or the iteration of Fiori 3 is implemented. However, it's a living design system, and also it's further developed, and also new things coming up that needs to be integrated. So this is an ongoing investment from our side to keep up with the specification of SAP Fiori 3. But as said, we have the components, we have the controls, we have Fiori elements to take your applications with it and to make you benefit automatically from these new investments without disturbing you or forcing you to reinvestments. Then, as said, we have the flexibility tools, not only for the developer, what I talked about, we also have it for the key user, who then can do the visual adaptations, but also we're working like we can do for the S4HANA Cloud already, an extend field scenario that even the key users triggers from the UI. We also work on that for the SAP Cloud Platform going forward. The next topic is also a very important one. We did really a heavy investment into performance, and as UI5 is a bigger framework, and also this Fiori elements, this template generation has to take place before you can start to display the screen. We also did that investment into performance, and now have a startup performance from the easy list report applications from below a second inside the FLP, and the other or many applications slightly above a second. What really feels feels really good if you now work with the system, and if you do it a second time, if you remain in the Fiori Launchpad, this also is faster, and so you benefit more and more from our performance improvements, and therefore we also hope that you are now really happy with the system performance if you use latest S4 releases. Also important, we did a big investment into accessibility support. There's now a new ARIA standard, VIE ARIA 1.1, which in some areas, unfortunately, was incompatible with the former standard. So the famous reading mode of a page, that you have a reading mode versus the application mode on page level, where the recommendation was changed. And so we received the feedback that by many companies who really focus on accessibility, that this new way is what they expect. And therefore, we have quite some legacy in controls, a lot of controls, but now we managed to work on it. And with the next UI5 long-term maintenance release 1.84, we can offer you the ARIA 1.1 support, and this will be publicly available according to our plans. As said, plans always change. We read the disclaimers in February 2021, what is quite close. And one thing that you now also might see soon is that one sample how we enhance Fiori 3. We call it Fiori 3 moments, that we want to make use of charts and graphics to describe situations, because the saying that a picture can tell more than 1,000 words. This is something what you also would like to leverage and bring into our software. And with that, give you the kind of best possible experience and usability. Good. Also, this one, as said, is future. ARIA is clearly done. We have to deliver. Fiori Moments is still in the making. Good. So now, as said, all that together should bring you in a position that we achieve a modern and consistent SAP Fiori user experience based on SAP UI5, based on Fiori elements. And if you want, you can also use the UI5 Web Components for specific cases in combination with other framework to achieve the best possible results towards Fiori. Good, and with that, I come to the summary of today. Please remember for, let's say, key pillars that we work on technology innovation, that we work on technology innovation to keep SAP UI5 up to date, and we innovate. Unlike other JavaScript frameworks, we innovate in a compatible way and really save your investments. And with that, we bring you an innovation to build then with the development experience, a perfect user experience. And we have also solutions around the adoption experience as the 4 pillars. And also, as said here, UI5 Web Components are available for the adoption scenario, but we also make them the basic control development for SAP UI5, eating our own champagne. We recommend you SAP Fiori tools and also Fiori elements in combination with OData v4 to boost your development efficiency. So please have a look and give it a try. The UI5 tooling is integrated into Fiori tools, but also available via the command line interfaces. And we also talked about UI flexibility, what is somehow a unique and powerful offering that only SAP UI5 can deliver, along with the web solutions that we have at SAP. Good, you find more information in this TechEd. I have some related TechEd sessions that you can have a look at, and hopefully you find also the time to attend as many as possible of them, because they are all will add you, let's say, additional and helpful information on top of what I have just explained. And not that it stops at TechEd, it hopefully continues also for you. The learning experience should continue. If you have still questions, please reach out to me. You find my contact dates, and I'm really willing to help you and bring you forward to make the best possible out of UI5 and to achieve the best possible end user experience for the people inside your companies. Thanks a lot.